Dames and Dragons. Some have said, hilarious. Some have said, I cried. Some have said, it isn't just the best D&D content I've found, it's some of the best content I've experienced ever.
Some have said Corbin is the best part.
Well, some have said Fran is the best part.
Only you say that, Fran.
Some have said, shut up, Corbin!
Some have said, this podcast is jam on toast. Some being me, Laika.
Me, Laika, have said.
Me, Laika, this podcast.
Some have even dared to say, listen to Dames and Dragons, a D&D actual play podcast on Don't Split the Podcast Network.
This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, I am chatting with Samwise Gamegee. Samwise is one of my dearest friends from before I was doing any podcasting or blogging in the D&D community. And now they, too, are an actual player, an advocate, and an all-around great human online. You're going to want to check out more of Sam at Samwise Gamegee on Twitter. And here is my conversation with them. Hey, everybody. Now I am here with one of my favorite humans who is a force for good in the tabletop role-playing game industry and also just a lot of fun. Sam, welcome to Tabletop Babble. For people who don't know, who are you and what do you do in tabletop role-playing games?
Well, first of all, thank you, James. Hey, I am Samwise. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at the Samwisest. I go by they, them pronouns, and I'm a disability activist and a TTRPG streamer with the Chromatic Chimera, as well as No Initiative. And I'm closely related to, or not related to, but I work closely with the folks over at Heroes Without Limits as well.
Yes, yeah, a streamer, a activist, a game designer, so many things on your resume.
That one is very new.
It is, and very exciting. And we're gonna get to Powered by the Thropocalypse. But first, take me back. When did you first play a tabletop role-playing game?
Okay, so the first time I played, like, an actual tabletop role-playing game was D&D 4e back in college, so this was, like, 2009-ish, somewhere around there. It was just kind of a standard, like, everybody had been kind of, drinking and stuff, and someone was like, well, we should play some Dungeons & Dragons. I hung out with a lot of nerdy theater kids, so that was the thing to do. But the first time I did, like, any sort of long-term game was a Scion campaign, also in college, so with some of those same people. But that was really cool. That was my first time. I kind of spent most of the time just panicking, trying to figure out what all of the dice and things on my sheet meant. And it was a wild game. We had like 12 people or something in it because it was everybody who lived in my ridiculous college house. That was the first time I got to really play. But growing up, I used to read like tabletop games that my best friend's older brother had. We never played it because I was kind of too young and it was like too much like AD&D books and oh shoot, what else did he have? I know he had like the first edition of Big Eyes Small Mouth.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, Vampire the Masquerade first edition, Changeling the Dreaming, and we would read those books and just sort of like essentially LARP our own stories, not knowing that that's what we were doing. But I had a lot of familiarity with like the books and the structure kind of like stories and storytelling before I got to play too much.
That's awesome, right? And I think when you're already naturally into fantasy, right, and sci-fi and other genre fiction, and when you are also a nerdy theater kid, it's almost like, wow, how have I not done this before? No matter what age you are when you play.
Absolutely. Tabletop like role-playing games are pretty much just long-form improv. And that's what I like most about it.
Yeah. So how did you then make the leap to getting more involved in streaming and activism online?
That happened when I had to leave work because of my health, actually. That happened in 2014. I have ankylosing spondylitis, which is a type of arthritis that essentially causes my vertebrae to fuse together. It's a lot of fun. And I also have Crohn's disease, and I have an ileostomy, which happened a few years ago and has definitely improved my quality of life, and that is pretty much what lets me be able to stream now, actually. Yeah, I had to leave work, and I was really, really sick, and it got to the point where I couldn't really function. And I started watching Critical Role. I saw it randomly on Twitch. I saw, D&D was trending, and I was like, how the hell is this a thing? And I started watching, and that was kind of the first time that I saw, because I know they're also very big theater nerds for the most part.
Right, yes.
And just that style of, very roleplay, character-driven gaming was something that I hadn't really known you could, or thought about that you could do with something like a tabletop RPG. And then I was like, oh, I want to do that. And once my health got better, I started streaming video games. And and then sort of from there, it was like I started getting more into just tabletop Twitter, and I answered a random casting call over with Encounter Roleplay, and the group that I started playing that very first stream with is actually what No Initiative is now. That's one of the casts from that first game that I ever streamed.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So that was pretty much just sort of how it started. Was I left work. I found a lot of comfort in watching other people play these games and creating these characters, and I realized that was something that I would really like to do, so I gave it a try. And I guess that's pretty much that. I like to I originally started streaming at all because I'd wanted to make a space for people to find somebody like what I needed when I left work. Sorry, that's really clumsily worded. But, when you're first struggling, especially with chronic illness or disability, it's really isolating. And especially when you get stuck at home all the time, because it got to the point where, I'm mostly homebound. Even, before COVID, everything, I was relatively isolated anyway. But internet lets you speak to people so much easier. And I found other people with the same disabilities and chronic illnesses that I have, and it was very comforting. So I was like, I kind of have nothing to lose by sharing a lot of my story, and I've always tried to be, some people tell me, way too open about things that I experience with my illnesses. So I just wanted to try to make that kind of space, and I started with video games and just sort of merged into tabletop instead, and I think I'm a lot comfier here.
And it's great to have you. I think your streaming is great. You are wonderful. Your theater skills are very clear. Whether you are running a game or playing a game, I think you're very good at like getting into character. You clearly have some ability with costumes as well. You often have a costume for your character when you show up online, which I think is great. And I also think that people really appreciate what you talk about online a lot, especially with what you are going through and advocating for disability. I know, right? We have been friends since before either of us was doing anything like this. And I feel like I, have learned a lot from you because of your activism, right? And because of even things as simple as like learning about options that I didn't have, finding new people who are also disability advocates to follow, so everybody should go follow Samwise because it's a great follow. And also there's fun jokes and memes and fun too. And cats, many cats.
Well, it's just the same too.
Right, but many pictures of
it's a lot of them.
Adorable cats. So I wanted to talk to you about what you're doing with Chromatic Chimera, right? I think this is a really great streaming channel organization. I guess, how would you describe Chromatic Chimera?
We are a group of friends who just like to tell tabletop RPG stories together. Mm-hmm. We have a really wonderful community that has, just become this really nice nest of support, and it's just a really friendly space. I began being involved at all with the Chromatic Chimera just as a player. Actually, Chris at Touch of Tiefling, he is one of our founders, along with Alex, who goes by at Mr. Puddins. They're the two founders, and they started our two main games that play on Wednesday. And I was one of the players in those after I play tested a module that Chris wrote. And that was before I ever streamed anything. I tried to help him with the playtest on oh my gosh, it was like a 2008 MacBook or something. The thing still had, a disk drive in it. To tell you how old it was, because that's where we are in time now. And it was terrible. And that was actually the thing that got me to be like, I need to get a better setup so that I can play more tabletop games online, because I have such a hard time doing it in person. And I realized how much more accessible having, a comfortable PC that can handle a video call or even an audio call makes such a difference. So yeah, that was how I first got involved, at least. And then since then, they would take disability sort of consultancy, I guess, from me. Nothing really official. It just kind of started as I would be like, hey, we could start using captions and stuff like that. And they got really supportive about it and really into it. And yeah, I just I felt so comfortable with them. And in the end of December 2019, they invited me to be an admin. And now I'm officially the accessibility director, and that's nice.
Yeah, it's great. And you don't see a lot of streams or even a lot of podcast networks, for that matter, right? Got to call out myself too, right? That have accessibility directors. What does an accessibility director do, and why is it something that we at DSPN should be hiring for right now?
Oh, man. Well, it's important, I think, for everybody to have some sort of accessibility consultant or director involved in your channel at, whatever level you're able to do. Because we should always, if possible, be paid for our work.
Yes.
At the Chimera, everything
agreed.
is done by volunteer, and also I can't work. So that doesn't matter for me, but other people, hire your disability consultants, please pay them. But so many people are disabled, chronically ill, or neurodiverse, or will be at some point. Specifically, the most recent, at least, study I have to quote is I can get real exact on y'all. A 2018 CDC study stated that approximately 26% of adults in the U.S. at least have some sort of disability. And, to get kind of heavy right here, frankly, that number is going to be going up right now.
Right.
With the pandemic and such, viral infections certainly cause chronic illness. Even if it's not from the virus itself, they can actually trigger underlying conditions people may not even know that they have. It's something that everybody pretty much will experience directly at some point. I mean, it's something that people should care about anyway, because everybody should have access to entertainment and news and everything. But if nothing else, it is something that will be personal at some point in your life, and people should address it all the time.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely true that it's something that I have learned, again, through following you and people like Jennifer Kretschmer. We're leaving behind and not including a big part of our population when we don't think about making things accessible, right? We don't think about, and I think a lot of us, right, children of the 80s and 90s think well, there's an elevator here, so this is an accessible building, and everything is okay now, right? And it's oh my gosh, disability is so much
there's
more.
so much. Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. So many people think disability is just about, people being paralyzed in wheelchairs. I mean, just quick shout out, ambulatory wheelchair users exist. I am one of them. Most people actually who are in a wheelchair have some sort of movement or mobility capability. Yeah, there's so many different types of accessibility needs, and they seriously help everybody. One thing I've been trying to work on is getting channels to use captions, just because I think it's something that's really important to try to be normalized. I understand that the current free caption setup is not necessarily ideal or perfectly accessible either, which is unfortunate, and I am always trying to find better ways to make things better. That's, that is another thing that an accessibility director does. My job isn't done once I make a suggestion. I'm trying to always learn and follow more people with disabilities that I don't have. It's really, I think, important that people try to learn things from people in the communities that they're trying to, reflect or respect and make accessible for.
I think part of that comes from the fact that we do a lot of lumping together of groups of people, right? So we will say like, hey, you're not straight, so you're part of this community, right? Or hey, you're not white. So obviously all people of color have the same issues, right? And I think we're doing the same thing with the disability community, right? But it's true that everybody has different needs, right? I think there are some incredible services out there, like you have introduced me to the fact that captioning is something that can at least be done for free, right? You can get even better if you're willing to pay someone to live caption.
Yeah, which would really be ideal, or paying somebody to do a transcription is another option. There are some people who do volunteer transcriptions. Those, that can be harder to find, and I always would rather try to pay people for their work.
Right.
It's hard because I'm on disabilities.
Right.
It's not a lot. Just putting that on the record. But yes, so just in terms of duties as an accessibility director, and things that they can do for channels is I do things, again, like I'm always trying to actively find ways we can improve accessibility, whether it's using captions, making sure that we're using alt text in all of the media that we put out for our Twitter. We make sure that we've got alt text for photos, GIFs, things like that. I have started doing in-character audio recaps for a couple of our shows.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which I make a point of providing a transcript for. When I first started, I would manually enter the captions as well so that YouTube had accurate ones, but I frankly don't have the spell slots to keep up for that. It's hard for me to sit at a computer and type. That is why I can't work.
Right.
But I do make sure that I have a transcript available for everything that I put out because it's audio only, and I want to ensure that anybody who, wants to catch up on our episodes for those shows are able to. Also, it's a lot of fun and an excuse for me to get to be in character extra.
Yeah, I love that you're doing that in character, right?
It's a lot of fun. It's I'm doing them regularly, at least for our Wednesday shows, Agora's Bells and Steam Spell. And each character is pretty much writing letters to somebody from their backstory and filling them in on what's been going on.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about the shows that you have, and we can start with Chromatic Chimera, but I know there's more, right? And then we can go to No Initiative and things like that.
Right. Well, No Initiative is with Chromatic Chimera right now. That's where we're playing. But I'll start with Chromatic Chimera because actually that is where my shows are these days. I was saying I work very closely with the folks over at Heroes Without Limits, which is an amazing disability channel that people should definitely check out. I've been one of the co-producers for a while. But my health has actually been kind of tanking lately, and I have not had the time to devote
I'm sorry to hear that.
it. I went on to a sabbatical starting in May, and I was hoping to be able to come back come like June or the end of summer, but I might be just stepping back further from a production level of work because it's a lot, I was saying I have trouble sitting at a computer for too long, so doing things like running tech, creating graphics, things like that, it's gotten to be a little much.
Yeah, definitely.
But that means I get to focus more time, at least, with accessibility and disability representation over at the Chimera, which is something that's really important in the games that we have there. So in terms of games that I am playing there, I mentioned our 2 main campaigns are Agora's Bells and Steam Spell. Those alternate on Wednesdays, and they're both homebrew settings. Our founder, Chris, Touch of Tiefling, is the GM for Agora's Bells, and that was the first game that I joined on the channel.
Oh, cool.
That sort of started me down the path. I play Blossom on the Water, my Tabaxi swashbuckler, who is now a warlock. It's kind of a problem, maybe.
That is such a great name, too.
It's not even her real name. Spoilers! You can find out in my recaps, because she fills you in. And the other game is Steam Spell, which is DM'd by Alex at Mr. Puddins, and that is our steampunk fantasy game in which I play Mixed Mouse, my tiefling gloomstalker grave cleric, and they are... I actually have a very, very big fondness for Mouse. I've unabashedly put a lot of myself into their character.
Right.
They are the first non-binary character that I made after coming out as non-binary.
Oh, wow.
I had played one before, and that was actually something that helped me figure out that I'm non-binary.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah, it was like one of those times where I was like, this has been something that I want to, see how it feels, kind of. And I was like, okay, this feels good, so I think this is right. And so Mouse is the first non-binary character that I made, like, with intent, behind, like, being able to do that myself. So that's been really nice. And Mouse is also canonically asexual like me, and they have Crohn's disease in canon, which is something that I reflect both mechanically and through roleplay. And that's been really amazing, actually, because I've been working very closely with the DM about that aspect of the game and, how to do that. That's another sort of accessibility director thing, too, like not even just for my characters. If somebody else wanted to implement a disabled character, I would be able to help work with people on that as well.
The idea of somebody tuning into your stream who has Crohn's and seeing themselves in a character, I think is amazing, right? Like, it's like, yeah, that's badass because you can be a badass hero, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's like one of the biggest things that I want to get out of streaming is helping to create that representation in stories, both in settings and in characters and in our casts. I do work I work very closely with Alex and Chris in terms of creating NPCs for disability representation as well. We actually have a host of disabled NPCs who have shown up in both campaigns, and I know some really cool ones who are on the way just because of things that I've talked about with them. So if that's something that you're interested in seeing, definitely check those shows out, because it's going to be really good. And it's been very rewarding for me to get to play Mouse in a stream with such supportive people.
Yeah, of course. That's great. What a crew.
Yeah, the cast is supportive, the DM is supportive, and even the characters are supportive, which is what's really amazing for me, like... Mouse is a, tiny little sickly green bean with a 7 constitution. And they don't eat any material food. Anything that they eat is arcane, because I decided, in a way of sort of reflecting the period of time that I was on TPN as part of my Crohn's, and I was being fed totally intravenously, because it's hard to absorb food with Crohn's. So I was like, magic food probably wouldn't have that problem. It's freaking magic.
Right, sure, yeah.
So Mouse's signature spell is Goodberry.
Yes.
Which now they try to make taste like peppermint candies, because we have our druid our Dragonborn druid who uses Goodberry to make like an endless bag of peppermint candies that he hands out. They're trying to mimic him, but they've never really had candy before, so their Goodberries just taste like Ricolas now, and I kind of love it. Like, it's just this little detail, but I love it.
That's great. Yeah, those little touches, I think, are just what make a streaming show very fun to watch, right? It helps us as the audience get to know the character a little bit more in a way that, like, feels very real and relatable, I think.
Yeah, and it's been really nice because it means like that character makes a point of making, like, our DM lets us reflavor Goodberry to go a little wild with it, you know, because he knows like this is you know, rule of cool kind of thing. Like, this is something fun and it works well for the characters. So I get to do things and be like, oh my god, Mouse got to enjoy their first ever s'more during our beach episode because our DM let us use Goodberry to make s'mores components instead. And that means, like, you know, my character with Crohn's got to enjoy an actual meal with their friends for the first time.
Yeah.
Instead of just sitting and watching everybody eat, which is something I've had to spend Thanksgivings doing. So, like, yeah, it can be rough. And I like being able to show those things in the stories that we tell.
Hey everyone, we're going to take a quick break and then back to the babble.
Leave behind the safety of the Humblewood and travel down the Tangrip coast to the Bay of Baluch, home to both the Kingdom of Den and the Serpent Domain. But neither hold the true power of the Bay, for that lies in the sea itself and the pirate lords that call her tides their own. The dread pirate Captain Bluebeak, Tiberius Fang, Kin the Bladeless, and Gabrielle LaFleur, the self-proclaimed pirate queen. Each one vying for power over the very tides themselves. But do any of them really have what it takes to hold up the legacy of the briny bulldog? Tune in each week to find out if our little crew has what it takes to stand up to the pirates of the blood-soaked waters. Dark Fortunes is available every Monday on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play. Set sail for high seas adventure.
Let's get back to the babble. You're also an amazing game master. I know this from personal experience. Everyone out there can be jealous that I have had Sam as a GM. Let's start at the beginning. Talk to me about Thra, and then we'll get into the game design stuff that you're doing.
Okay, so I guess for starters, over at Heroes Without Limits, I had wanted to run a mini-series called Tales from Thra, which was a D&D like homebrew thing that I was making to try to sort of tell a story that happens before the Age of Resistance series, because I'm a big Dark Crystal fan.
Yes.
That is a movie I grew up watching, and it is absolutely like one of the reasons that I got into fantasy. I love Henson. I love Brian Froud. His Fairies Oracle deck was one of the first like divination card decks that I ever owned.
That's awesome.
When I first started getting into that. They are beautiful. They're gorgeous. Just like the art alone is phenomenal. And my health just wasn't enough to keep up with that sort of level of game running. So one thing is I've decided I want to just try to do something a little easier. So, you know, to make things easier, I decided to design my own thing.
Right. You were like, how can I make this easier on me? I'll design a game.
Yeah, I'll design a game, you know, more or less from scratch. But it happened because I started, over on the Chromatic Chimera, we started a City of Mist campaign, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse inspired, you know, 2d6 system that I have just fallen in love with. It's so fun and cinematic. It's a game that lets you, like, come up with your own abilities and moves that you can make. Like, I've played a handful of different Powered by the Apocalypse games at this point, mostly one-shots, but I've really enjoyed it every time. But for some reason, City of Mist, I guess because I've gotten to play, it's been an 8-episode series. Our finale is this Friday at the time
Oh,
of
cool.
recording.
Yes.
But it's been such a fun system. Like, I got to name my own moves for my Baba Yaga inspired character that, like, have to do with, like, trickery and deceit and stuff. Like, I've got one that I just called These Are Not the Droids You're Looking For, and I use it, like, anytime I'm trying to convince somebody of something, and it's just the best. I'd like to roll These Are Not the Droids you're looking for. Like, it's ridiculous. But so I realized that style of game, though, that really cinematic, free, open-ended focus, really fits the Jim Henson, Brian Froud kind of vibe and feeling, and making things easier on myself. I was like, those stories are also easier to run, I find, like a Powered by the Apocalypse. It can be kind of a low prep game.
It's true, right? I think Powered by the Apocalypse is a system that focuses a lot on collaborative storytelling, almost as a way to not just give the players a little bit more storytelling power, but also to make it easy to pick up and play. The GM doesn't have to do a ton of prep work, unless you're building the game from scratch, and then...
I mean, to be perfectly fair, it's not just me working on this either. Because I have never tried to design a game, and I am not somebody who cares about mechanics. That was another problem with my attempt at homebrewing. Tales from Thra it was not freaking balanced at all, which is fine if you're just playing for funsies, but I still want everybody to have fun. So, I asked my friend Alex, Mr. Puddins, our founder at Chromatic Chimera, because he's been getting really into the design end of things, which I know is at least partially inspired by your recent feature overhaul for like the point buy system.
Point buy for Dungeons and Dragons racial traits. Yes, was a thing. Yeah.
That was something that has sort of like got us all started. I'm like, we should do more design stuff our own way.
Yes,
honestly,
that is. I can retire now. That's
like,
great.
That kind of got the ball rolling, honestly, because it was like, this is really, this is nice, and you know what? I like City of Mist. I want to do my, own kind of thing.
Cool. I love that.
Yeah. So Alex has been doing a lot of the actual like mechanic work for our Thra game, which we are, working title at least, we're just sort of jokingly calling it Powered by the Thrapocalypse. So right now it is me, Alex Noreen at Mr. Puddins, and Kate Henry at Kate's D8s, who is also in Agora's Bells with me.
Yes, yeah.
And she's a huge Dark Crystal fan. She's got a tattoo of Hup's spoon.
Wow. Okay.
That is dedication. She is serving as our lead lore expert, pretty much. And Alex is doing most of the mechanics. I'm the person who's just kind of like, hey, it'd be cool if we did this kind of thing, and then like he figures it out.
Right.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how it comes out. We are currently talking about maybe reframing it to be set in his Steam spell world, actually, so that we can sort of take more ownership of bits of the lore and the story and stuff. And it's still very Dark Crystal.
Right.
But, it also potentially gives us, the ability, if we want to like run a stream of it, which is what I would like to do, it, frees up some of the sort of legality concerns, because it's still very much a fan
Right.
project. Again, I can't work anything. Nothing I do is for profit.
Right. Yeah.
I personally kind of have a dream, though, of if we can get this kind of thing polished up, I would really like to release it for free, with like the request of a charitable donation if you decide to download it.
Sure.
That is nothing I've ever done, or so I don't really know how to go about that, or like, what the legal requirements are of that with a property. So we're just kind of like, maybe we should set it in our own setting.
Yeah, and often people will have a, hey, if you're not making money off of our thing, you can use our IP. Somebody actually just posted the Wizards of the Coast one because they wanted to do something with magic or that kind of thing. And Wizards of the Coast says, hey, you can use our IP, right? As long as you're not profiting from it. And so Henson might have the same thing.
Right? We're kind of like, they're cool, right? Lisa Henson.
Yeah. Lisa, big fan of Tabletop Babble. Lisa Henson. If you are listening,
hey, you never know.
First of all, thank you. Second of all,
Gym play tabletop. Come on.
I mean, it sounds super, super cool, and I like want to play. I want it now, and I would like to play.
Absolutely, James. 100%. Like, we're definitely going to be running some playtest stuff. Right now, our plan is we're writing a Thraw, like clearly, Dark Crystal Thraw version, and we're just sort of making plans for, maybe we can do kind of both and see how it goes. But I'm excited to finish one day telling my Tales from Thraw story in this whole new setting. Because it's wild. I kind of made up my own lore anyway, so if we make our own setting, that's fine, because then, like, the diehard lore fans won't have to have an aneurysm over me being like, yeah, sure, the Arathamirs were, like, 900 trine? Yeah, all right. I think they were only, like, 3 or 5. I don't know. Kate, fact lore check me.
Yeah. Don't at Sam, okay?
Yeah. Don't at me for the lore inconsistencies. I'm a narrative director is what I've decided to call myself.
That's good. That's great. And it's so it's very cool to see people put the work in, and I think even when you're using the bones of a system that exists, like Powered by the Apocalypse or Fate or the 5e OGL, whatever it may be, to make your thing, right? It's still a lot of work, and you have to think about how do you change the system to fit the story that you want people to be able to tell with it, and how do you, as simple as like, what should the playbooks be for this?
Exactly. I mean, it's something we're having a lot of fun with. We're trying real hard to play with like the epic fantasy feel of Dark Crystal and Henson, but still slip in some of those kind of like, wacky, this is Muppets,
right.
Kind of humor, Like, I know our current plan pretty much is characters are going to be playing essentially Gelflings, and everybody chooses a Gelfling clan and a trade. I'm trying to think of like an example of something that Alex wrote that I really, really loved. What was like my favorite thing that I could reference? Here, one thing he has is we created a trade called Chamberlain, which is pretty much an ambassador for a Madra. If the Madra's too busy to handle whatever is going on, their Chamberlain can go deal with it in their stead. And they have the special move of filibuster, which is like it's so ridiculous. And
that's great.
Yeah, it's just a lot of fun. It really is.
So are you taking a more like City of Mists modular approach with this, where like you slot in some different things? Or is this, I don't mean to start dropping too many Powered by the Apocalypse games, or is this more like a game where it's like you pick your playbook and you then pick things in your playbook from that?
We're keeping it, I guess, sort of more like it's a combo. What we've got right now is you get some stats. Mm-hmm. What are they? I'm like trying to remember. Yeah. This is all stuff that we've come up with in literally the last week.
Totally. And so the other thing we should say is, everything could be different, right? So
yeah, absolutely. But just to sort of, help people like see the kind of things we're working on right now is, I know we've got stats. It's bodies, soul, fellowship, and knowledge or lore. I forget which one we went with. I like lore because lore is funny if you like Gauge of Resistance. But yeah, we're trying to slip like a lot of Easter eggs and obvious references in.
Right. So I do love lore.
Yeah. So the idea is pretty much when you pick your clan and your occupation gives you like a set of set of what we're calling boons and banes, as well as like a special move ability that you get. And then your clan, you select X number of boons and X number of banes, and those are things that you can add to your role when relevant.
I really like the customization of that, right? Like, I think sometimes when a Powered by the Apocalypse game has just a playbook, right, you might feel a little hamstrung into like, I want this concept, but I want to be able to tweak these things. But it sounds like you've given the ability to really get in there and mix and match in great ways.
That's what we're trying to do, and we're actively encouraging the people within the writing to like our players and storytellers within our writing to come up with their own things too. If there's something that you want your character to do that's not listed as a suggested boon or bane, talk with your GM and come up with your own thing. Some examples for boons for the Vapra clan. If you're familiar with Age of Resistance or other Dark Crystal things, is like, a boon is in the name of the Almadra. You're able to, like, whip that out if you're trying to, like, persuade somebody or something like that. And that's the other thing, is these are trying to be sort of vaguely worded or phrased, so you can determine if an opportunity, like, really fits for it. Obviously, your storyteller gets the final say. Don't, be a jerk and argue with them. But, then we have, like, banes for a Vapra would be, like, high maintenance, because they're used to living in, like, a very, favored by the Skeksis lifestyle. So maybe if you're in, like, a camping, thing, you're gonna get, like, a bane reduction to your rolls trying to start a campfire or something like that. That's up to your, storyteller. I'm excited about that. We'll also provide some suggested, like, personality traits that you could use for one of those X number of banes, because I don't like the idea of sticking personalities to, like, a clan identity, like
Sure.
That doesn't seem right. You're gonna have all kinds of people all over the place. So personality traits, things like that. I'm really excited because, I'm freaking involved. So I'm making a special accessibility and disability section where it's pretty much just going to be like explicitly stating disability exists in Arthra and everything is freaking accessible, because not even the Skeksis are ableist jerks. So, plus I'm making recommendations for ways that storytellers or players could, if they want to portray their own disability or something like that in a game. I always try to encourage people to portray their own conditions, or at least do a lot of research and consultation if you're trying to portray a disability or a chronic illness that you do not have. But I'm, providing options for things like prosthetic wings. So, maybe somebody is born with, a wing that didn't form fully or something. So here's a device that lets you, make like a prosthesis so you can still glide and stuff. Have some service phys gigs or land striders to help people get around. Like, our Castle of the Crystal has ramps. The Emperor's not climbing up like 500 steps to get to the chamber.
Of course
so they got ramps and lifts in the castle. So I'm excited because I don't see that in games ever. I know the Fate accessibility toolkit exists. I've actually not played Fate, but I have heard nothing but good things for the most part about that. So that is definitely something that I want to check out. But otherwise, I've never seen somebody explicitly, try to have an accessible world created or encouraged. And I want that. So I'm very excited to be able to do that, especially with people who are being so supportive about it.
Yeah, definitely. That is really cool to hear. And it's one of those things that Kat Cool was a big supporter of in when we were writing Burn Bright together. And she was very much like, even at one point, right, we were looking at a map together and she was like, corners, like having like really well-defined corners in your building is not necessarily an accessible thing because people can bump into them and hurt themselves. So even having things like that, like we were like, oh yeah, okay, cool. And that's also going to give our world a more unique feel if our buildings have more rounded edges, right? And that kind of thing. And you see more ramps, like it automatically made everything feel like in a different place, and also in our case, like a sort of futuristic kind of thing, because people were thinking about this, right? Which is the hope for the future. I cannot wait to get to Powered by the Thropocalypse.
Well, you're definitely invited to come play, James. So.
Yay! I want to.
100%.
I want to. I love Age of Resistance and the Dark. Same thing. Grew up with it.
Yeah. Oh man.
It's great. It's great. Have you ever tried to show the Dark Crystal to anybody who didn't see it as a kid? Not Age of Resistance.
I have.
Yeah?
It's very hit or miss. It's like one of those things where I sort of, depending on the person, I either give the warning of like, now remember, this is from the 80s. That kind of like, it's not going to look good, but it's very good.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't know. I have the opposite problem with people who grew up actually with Dark Crystal not wanting to watch Age of Resistance because they're like, no, it's gonna like ruin it for me. And I get to, for I think maybe the first time in my life of like something that I'm a fan of that got like a remade or a prequel, I get to go, no, it is so much better than you think.
It really is. It was shocking.
Seriously, it's really amazing. I don't know. I've never met Jim Henson, but I have to say I think he would be freaking proud.
Yeah. Really, it is really, really great. And there's they even have a great behind the scenes documentary on Netflix that is
I've watched that
really
many
wonderful.
times.
Yeah, it's great. So the question is, in Powered by the Thropocalypse,
yes,
can I interact with Andy Samberg as a Skeksis? That's the real question.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to see if I can find somebody to like help us write a section about doing a good Frank Oz impression for the storyteller. That would be pretty amazing, actually.
This is just super, super wonderful, and it's very cool to see you take this leap now into the world of game design after taking the leap and being in streaming for a long time. So, and I'm excited to see what you share with the world. You've gotten more and more branched into indie gaming and into non-D&D gaming. Are there favorites out there that either you want to try or that you recommend to people to check out who maybe want to try something other than D&D?
Yeah, definitely. I already gushed a lot about City of Mist, but I'm really enjoying that so much.
Yeah. We did a podcast with the creator of City of Mist, so if people want to check that out, they can too. Yeah, it's great.
I'm gonna check that out because I didn't know you did that.
Yeah. Yeah, I worked on a small supplement for them, and which was a blast, and then so I got to say, hey, do you want to come on the podcast? Well, I was doing that, so
that's really
that was
awesome.
fun.
I'm really, really enjoying City of Mist, so I would not can't recommend that enough. I briefly played some Numenera for a podcast that ended up kind of falling apart just because of scheduling, and I really wanted to try playing that some more. The character I was playing in that was arthritic, actually. She had like nanotech implants that I based off of infusions that I used to need to get like regularly, and it was just kind of inspired by that. Like she had to keep refilling them. And that was really cool to, get to do. I'm sad we didn't. I'd love to be able to take that character into maybe a new game or something. Otherwise, I'm trying to think what else. I've been telling you I want to play more Dialect, which is pretty much, a one-shot kind of game, but it's got lots of different scenarios that you can play, and I really want to explore those more. That is a beautiful game. And I want to play a Blades in the Dark campaign. I've played a one-shot, and I loved it, so I would really like to try and explore that game more long-term.
Yeah, it's got some great sort of campaign mechanics with the crew and everything, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
looks
I would
really
love
cool.
to play it too, because I've only ever played one-shots as well. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it seems like such a neat game because those crew dynamics. Again, I'm all about the character narratives and party interactions and stuff. So having that kind of built-in mechanic is really cool to me.
Definitely.
Really
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
awesome. Well, Sam, this has been a great conversation. If people want to find you online, where should they go and what should they do?
Yeah, you can find me online. My personal Twitch is at the Samwisest. I am also pretty much always hanging out with the folks over at the Chromatic Chimera. It's 1C in our Twitter and 2 C's for our Twitch because character limits. But please come and check us out. We've got a lot of new stuff coming up too. We're trying to focus more and more on indie games. We have existing, for example, Unprepared, which is a weekly game, or bi-monthly or so, with Megan Lynn for the win, who is an amazing game creator, actually. If you want to talk indie game creators to check out, she is phenomenal. She's got some really cute games I want to try, like Telling the Bees, where you it's based on some New England custom, and it's adorable. You talk to bees and you're beekeep like your village, or it's really really cute, and I want to play it. So we'll have to play it sometime, James, because I think you would like it.
Yes, I am in.
Right?
I want to talk to
Or
bees.
maybe we are the bees. It's either way, I want it.
Right.
Yeah.
I want it too.
So,
I want it
yeah,
too.
check
That's
me out
amazing.
on Twitter, on Twitch. I am streaming with Chromatic Chimera. I'm on their Discord all the time as well, so you can get a link for that on our Twitch as well. And I also play with the folks at No Initiative, so you can follow me there because I manage our social media. So that's at No Initiative TV. We're going to be doing some cool stuff too in the future.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you, Sam, so much for joining me today on Tabletop Babble. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, James.
Thanks, everybody, so much for listening. You can support the show by heading on over to patreon.com/Intricasso and heading on over to Apple Podcasts, leaving us a 5-star review. One gets you a lot of extra content. The other, guess what the other one does? That is going to help other people find the show and is totally free. Plus, if you leave us a 5-star review, I'll read it out loud. You can make me say anything you want. Hey, I also wanted to let you know that the Fantastic Lairs Kickstarter, which we talked about on an episode of Tabletop Babble with Mike Shea and Scott Gray, is in its final week as of the launch of this podcast. We have already blown through many stretch goals, and you will get so much more bang for your buck if you back this book right now. So head to fantasticlairs.com and you can find a direct link to the Kickstarter over there. It is 20 drop-in boss battles for your 5e D&D games, and it is super duper fun. Also, guess what was just announced? Burn Bright. It's an original science fantasy RPG that I led the design on. Jim McClure, Kat Cool, Darcy Ross, they all worked on the design team as well and were incredible. It is built for Roll20 from the ground up. You can find out a bunch of stuff about it over at burnbright, BRYTE.com, and you can pre-order the game so that when it goes live July 7th, you'll have it in your little digital fingers. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. You can find me on Twitter at James Intricasso and at worldbuilderblog.com. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network that's edited by Nate Pausenga. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding DSPN with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Thanks so much for listening.
I'm Lisa Chen, and I host Behold Her, a monthly podcast that shines a spotlight on women in the world of tabletop games. There are so many women to behold in this amazing hobby, and our experiences as female gamers are as diverse as we are as individuals. through one-on-one interviews, audio essays, and panel discussions, all centered around a monthly theme. The guests on Behold Her share their unique stories as players, game masters, designers, artists, organizers, and so much more. Their words are inspiring, uplifting, and informative. Check out Behold Her Podcast wherever podcasts are found, or visit beholdherpodcast.com.